Hi, Kirk Mitchie with Candor Advisors. This week it is all about the hiccup. And what I mean by that is every single deal I've ever been involved in and all of the deal professionals I know, whether they be on the buyer or seller side, everything they've ever been involved in has at least one and sometimes multiple hiccups. These are things that if you're the buyer, make you question whether you want to move forward with the deal. If you're the seller, you're certain they're going to imperil what you've already been planning in terms of the deal. So the most common of those would be something happens in financial due diligence where it restates the economics of the business enough that the buyer feels like they need to change the price to fairly calibrate for that change. If you're the seller, you feel like there's a renege going on or the terms have changed. And even if you don't have an emotional reaction to it, you just might mathematically think, okay, this no longer makes sense. When that happens, it's really important to remember that that's probably not personal. Some of it's formulaic. And if both parties still want to move forward with the deal, then it's probably reasonable for both sides to give a little bit and get to the right solution. The other thing that often happens is something in legal due diligence happens. Maybe there are supplier agreements in place that have like a first right of refusal or some confidentiality protections that will not allow the buyer to do due diligence or will not allow the seller to accept the offer. There's a way to work through those things too. Usually it involves hitting the pause button. Usually it involves both sides making a little bit of a leap of faith that what's happening is workable, that it's going to extend the time frame a little bit, but it can be resolved. And here again, as long as there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, there's a way to get through that hiccup too. There are also emotional hiccups, right? The seller asks a question to the buyer reacts badly to that. The buyer has a data request of the seller reacts badly to that. Trying to take the emotions out of businesses that involve people is impossible. However, if there are good advisors involved, they can allow for perspective on either side to share with, let's say I'm advising the seller that this is common, that it was not an insult, and that it's reasonable for them to be asking for this. And if you're the buyer, to see how your request has landed with the seller and explain why you need what you need. And here again, willing buyer, willing seller, it can be worked out. Any of these things, any of these hiccups could derail a deal. None of them has to, unless of course the underlying rationale or economics of the deal no longer makes sense, in which case they should derail the deal. But if we can be helpful either with our experience or resources in any of these areas, please navigate over to candor-advisors.com and reach out. We'd love to work with you. Thanks.